Hi guys, in this video we're going to take a look at the 8.1 Day 3 opener. I just want to make this in a video so you guys can have it to reference when you're studying for the test. So if we remember from class, the standard form of a circle is given by the equation x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where hk is the center and r is my radius. Okay? So we're going to be using the standard form of a circle to help us identify the center and radius of any circle that's written in standard form. So if we take a look at example 1 says, what is the center and radius of the circle given by the equation x plus 4 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals 49? Okay, so if I'm looking at this equation here, and I know that hk is my center, well, remember, we always have to take the opposite of what's on the inside of our parentheses. So what's the opposite of positive 4? It's negative 4. And what's the opposite of negative 6? It's positive 6. Okay, so the center of the circle is at negative 4, 6. And then if you look over here at the right-hand side of the standard form equation, right, this x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is set equal to r squared. In this case, 49 happens to be our r squared. So how do we get the radius by itself? How do we get r by itself? Well, we need to undo squaring, which is square rooting. So if I square root both sides, right, then I get 7 equals r. So the radius would be 7. Alright, looking over at example 2, example 2 says, write the equation of a circle with a center 4, negative 6 and a radius of root 13. Okay, if the center is 4, negative 6, then over here in my standard form, I know my left-hand side will be x minus 4 squared, right, because 4 is the h, and then k is negative 6, so plus y minus negative 6. Well, minus a negative 6 is the same thing as doing plus 6, right? What's the opposite of negative 6? It's positive 6 squared, okay, equals my radius squared. So here it tells me the radius is root 13. So I need to take root 13 and square it, okay? So simplifying, this gives me the equation x minus 4 squared plus y plus 6 squared equals the square of root 13, so that will give me 13. Okay, so this is the equation of my circle. Alright, number 3 says, they want us to graph the circle x plus 2 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 9, and then identify the center and radius. Okay, so I like to actually identify the center and radius first, and then use this information to help me graph my circle over here. So my center, the h comma k, the h value comes from the opposite of positive 2, so that would be negative 2. And then the k value comes from the opposite of positive 1, which is negative 1. And then here, 9 is equal to my radius squared. So how do you solve for the radius alone? We must square root both sides. So then our radius is 3. So effectively, we're going over here and graphing a circle with the center negative 2, negative 1. So here's negative 2, negative 1, and a radius of 3. To get a radius of 3, we're just going to count 3 units in each direction. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, draw your circle that goes through these points. Alright. Number 4 says, write the equation of a circle with center 2, negative 5, and a point on the circle being negative 7, negative 1. Alright, so we're going to go to our coordinate grid here. Find the center as 2, negative 5. So here's 2, And if we go negative 5, we're at this point here. I'm going to go ahead and label this my center. And then they also tell me I have a point on this circle at negative 7, negative 1. So here's negative 7. Go down 1 unit. Right? Here is the point negative 7, negative 1. So here's a point that's already on my circle. Okay? If I draw a line between these 2 points, right? I know that any line that goes from the center to a point on the circle, this line is going to be a radius. Okay? How do I find the length of this radius? Well, let's take a look at what happens if we draw the triangle that is formed between these 2 points. So to get from the center to this point, I had to go up this many units and to the left this many units. So I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4 units, and I'm going to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 units. Alright, well, anytime I have an intersection of a vertical line and a horizontal line, that's a right angle. So to solve for the radius, I can use the Pythagorean theorem, right? I know that 9 squared plus 4 squared will give me whatever my radius squared is. Okay, so 9 squared, that's 36, and 4 squared is 16. I'm sorry, 9 squared, that's 81, and 4 squared is 16. So add these together, that should give me whatever my radius squared is. So that 97 equals the radius squared, and then to get the radius by itself, square root both sides, the radius should be the square root of 97. Alright? So going back to the problem, they tell me that the center of this circle is at 2, negative 5. So if I'm writing my equation in standard form, remember standard form is this x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared equation. Alright? So if I'm writing my equation in standard form, and I know my center is at 2, negative 5, then the left-hand side of my equation will be x minus h, where, h is 2, so x minus 2 squared, plus y minus k, so y minus negative 5, which is really y plus 5 squared, equals the radius squared. So notice my radius is the square root of 97. The radius squared I solved for up here was positive 97, right, without the square root. So I want it to be equal to my radius squared. So I want to pick this 97 equal to r squared, so equal to 97. Alright, so here's my equation of this circle that meets these specific requirements. Alright. Moving on to number 5. Number 5 says, write the equation of a circle that contains negative 3, 7, and 7, 1 as the endpoints of its diameter. So over here on my grid, I'm going to go to negative 3, positive 7, and say that's 1 point on my diameter. The other point on my diameter is at 7, 1. So here's 7, up 1 unit, right? This distance right here is my diameter, right? Read this very carefully. It says the endpoints of your diameter. So if I were you, I would go ahead and label this as my diameter, right? Notice over here, the distance from the center to any point on the circle, that's defined to be a radius, okay? But here, they're telling you that these two endpoints form our diameter, okay? Now, how do we find the length of the diameter? Well, same as before, I can go ahead and draw a triangle to tell me how I get from this point to this point. Okay, so in my triangle, I'm going down this many units and to the right this many units. Right? So I'm going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units. And I'm going to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 units. Okay, it doesn't matter if I'm doing 6 or negative 6. I can put a negative 6 here because technically we're going down 6. But whenever you square a negative number, you'll still get a positive number. So like negative 6 squared is 36 and 6 squared is 36. So this doesn't really matter. Okay, but what does matter is we know this is a right triangle. To solve for the diameter, I know that whatever negative 6 squared, add that to the other leg, 10 squared, has to equal the diameter squared. Alright, so negative 6 squared is 36. 10 squared is 100. Add these together, I should get my diameter squared. So 136 is equal to the diameter squared. Okay, well, I'm not interested in the diameter squared. I'm not really even interested in the diameter at all, right? Because remember in our equation, we need to have the radius, okay? But to get the radius, first it's helpful to find the diameter. So the diameter, to get the value of d, right, I need to square root both sides of d squared. So the square root of 136 will be equal to the diameter. Well, you can take 136 and break that up into 4 and 34. So the square root of 136 is really the same thing as saying the square root of 4 times 34. Okay, that's equal to diameter. Square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 34 is the square root of 34. Right, so that's equal to our diameter. Alright, so now, how do we find the radius if we know the diameter? Well, the radius is always half your diameter. So if you take the diameter and divide by 2, you will get the radius. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side. So we know that square root of 34 must be the radius. Okay. Now, we want to find the equation of a circle that contains these 2 points. Alright? So the first thing we need to do, well, what do we need to find the equation of a circle? We need to find the center and the radius. Okay, so we know the radius is the square root of 34. Okay, now the question becomes, how do I find the center of a circle? Well, if I'm given the diameter, the center of the circle is the midpoint of the diameter. So here are 2 points, right? Negative 3, 7 and 7, 1. If I find the midpoint of these 2 points, that should give me the center of my circle, right? Just like how here they're giving me the center, right? This should give me the center if I find the midpoint of these 2 points. So the midpoint formula, that is taking the average of the x values and the average of the y values. So to find our center of the circle, right, we're going to go ahead and take the x values and find the midpoint. So that would be negative 3 plus 7 divided by 2. And the average of the y values, so that would be 7 plus 1 divided by 2. Alright, so negative 3 plus 7 divided by 2, and 7 plus 1 divided by 2. Alright, simplifying, this should give me 4 divided by 2, which is 2, and 8 divided by 2, which is 4. So my center is 2, 4, and my radius is the square root of 34. So then my equation will be x minus h squared, so x minus 2 squared, plus y minus k squared, so y minus 4 squared, equals the radius squared. So the radius is root 34, and I'm squaring that. So finally, I should get x minus 2 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 34, right? Squaring and square rooting undo each other, so I'm left with just 34. So this should be my equation. Right.